Okay, welcome to another edition of Culture Class Podcast, the podcast where we get to interact with people from different backgrounds, get to learn about other cultures. And today I have a second edition of my Hispanic Heritage Month interview series. So in the month of October, we're going to be talking to different people of Hispanic descent or Latino descent and just, talking about their backgrounds, talking about, their life, different things, just what we usually do on the podcast, but we're just dedicating our interviewees to people of Hispanic descent in the month of October. So welcome to podcast, Elvis.
Thanks for having me, man. I didn't think that I'd ever make it on here. It's my first podcast. I'm good. I'm here.
Right. I know, right? And this is probably somewhat a long time coming because we've known each other for going on 4 months, 5 months, something like that. And we're working on a separate podcast project together, which I don't know how much we can talk on, but maybe we can address that. But yeah, how do I say your last name? Is it León or Leone?
León.
León. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say like Leone sounds a little more Italian, not Hispanic, but León is like.
Yeah, I mean, that's been just a problem that I've had, I guess, for a long time because I grew up with my name being Elvis Orlando León.
Oh, it's Elvis.
Elvis
Orlando León.
León. Yeah, but obviously I grew up in the U.S., so it immediately becomes Elvis Orlando Leon.
Got it.
Yeah, but I was named after Elvis Presley, so obviously... that's embarrassing and all. I don't even want to get into that.
Not really.
Part, but.
not really. If you think about it, like, it's not that embarrassing. I mean, I'm sure your dad grew up in the 60s when Elvis was pretty much, I don't know who's there now, Justin Bieber or something?
Yeah.
Or whoever.
Exactly. Post Malone or something.
Yeah, Elvis being Post Malone. Can you imagine Elvis saying, what's it? It's a celebration. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Exactly. But obviously at home, my parents called me Elvis. And, my brother and sister call me Elvis.
Oh, they actually call you by your name. Because I was talking about this with my interviewer, the person I interviewed last week. And she was like, in a lot of Hispanic, or let me say Latino households, they have a lot of nicknames for kids. Like they call you Shorty or Little One or, whatever. But they just call you Elvis?
Yeah, Elvis. Yeah, Elvis. That's what they call me. I guess, that's basically like a nickname and a first name rolled into one.
What about your siblings? Like everyone is being called your name at home? No nicknames whatsoever?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's definitely some nicknames that float around, but none of them stick. I think we all call each other by our first names. Yeah, the only...
Interesting. Wait, you call your parents by their first name?
No. Mom and dad. Actually, the only person that has a nickname in the house is my dad, and we call him Chucho, like dog. And that's kind of...
Okay.
It's kind of disrespect. Yeah, it's kind of in a more disrespectful way, actually. But
got it.
No, Chucho. Yeah.
Okay, let's peel back the layers and talk about your parents. And we'll talk about your military career in a short while. Because anytime I see you have to have some kind of reference to the Army. It's either a hat or like a shirt or like you're wearing camo khakis or something. Like it's pretty interesting to see how proud you are of your service. Like a number of years after that kind of thing.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
No, let's talk about your parents first. Let's talk about, I don't want to call your dad Chucho, so I'll call him Mr. Leon.
Yeah.
And your mom, like, how they meet? Like, have they ever talked to you about how their life was? Because from what I understand, they're both from Guatemala. So, like, kind of like growing up, did they ever tell you about when they were younger, even before they met, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, no, they're actually, my dad's Guatemalan. And my mom is Mexican.
Oh, your mom is Mexican.
Yeah, and they both came to the U.S. in the 70s. So then they met there in Los Angeles specifically. So, yeah, they worked in different, like, factories. I think a lot of people that came to the country, especially in L.A., one of the first jobs that you probably got was at a warehouse or factory. And as what my parents have told me is that it's funny because like some of these warehouses would have like 7, 8 family members that all just came from Mexico because so there's always the first that arrives and gets the job. And then once he's secure, the plug, he ends up like, yo, I got a job, I can get you on. And then boom, next thing you know, everyone's just coming over from Mexico and Guatemala. So they both had a similar experience where like their family members, someone came before them and soon after they came. But they were the early wave of people in my family that came over to the U.S.
It's pretty interesting when I hear about a lot of Latinos coming to the US from other Latin American countries. Reason being that I'm Nigerian, right? So I'm an immigrant myself, but like English is pretty much the lingua franca in Nigeria. We have our tribal languages here and there, but in some South American countries, like people coming over to the US just know Spanish. And even though you might end up going to a state like Texas or Los Angeles where people speak Spanish, also like situations where, and not just from Latin America, other countries where they don't speak English at all. I still see these people coming here and still making their way. And 10, 20, 30 years later, they have like a life to show for it. It's just amazing. I don't know if it's the sheer will of the previous generation. I don't know if our generation has that much drive and hustle, to be honest. But what do you think it was? Do you just think like the environment was more susceptible for immigrants 30 years ago, or the drive in the immigrants coming was a lot stronger like 30 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think obviously when they were kids growing up, I mean, well, at least the U.S. used the biggest propaganda machine they have, Hollywood, to make all of these films and pictures and show what the U.S. was like. So I think, and my parents are big fans of cinema. So I think that was probably the first calling to them, like, wow, like that place looks amazing. Like, let's go, But again, some of the early members of our family that came over, I think they spoke to some of that, what you heard, about the U.S. being the land of opportunity, and the American dream is here. So so I think that was a big part of why they came over, for sure.
It is interesting, right? Because I've said it on the podcast before. It's funny you mentioned that on like a very old episode that's like the ad agency for the country, like Hollywood. Like they just like the U.S. like expert marketing machine, and like other people might do the job. It might be like whether that's like Russians helping out with NASA, or people of Jewish descent helping out with Hollywood, or people helping out with different industries. They just brand it American and like put it out there. That's why is it baseball competition is called the World Series, even if it's just U.S. teams playing.
Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, and then my parents ended up working at the same factory. It was like a carpenter shop. I think they said that they used to make like tables and all kinds of different shelves or whatever. And my mom actually joined some of the protests that were happening at that time, and they were fighting for higher wages and like health insurance. So there was a period where they were striking every day, obviously not working, and their demands weren't being met. So my mom says that one day that a new wave of like employees came that were going to replace them, and she noticed this one guy show up in a motorcycle, and that was my dad, and he walked in, but they were yelling at all these new employees walking into the shop.
Because they were coming to replace
They were coming to replace them. So my mom said that they were just yelling obscenities at them and traitors, or join the movement, like they're going to screw you too, all of this. And anyways, I guess a couple more weeks happened, and they didn't win. So, but they were given a chance to stay. So that was actually like the settlement. Like, hey, like you guys can fuck off, or you guys can come back to work. And they didn't have any other options. So my mom said that majority of them, maybe they split. Like half of them left, and the rest went back to work, my mom being one of them. But she lost some of her rank in the position. So then my dad was her supervisor, where it would have been the other way around. Yeah.
Well, your dad who just came to replace her became her supervisor.
Exactly. So there was tensions there, but I guess.
And they still got married? Like,
yeah, I know, right?
And your dad, I think I must soak up some game from him.
Exactly. But no, I mean, I guess, they worked together, closely together, and one thing led to another. And I was born in 1984.
Got it. So you were actually born in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I was born in LA.
What was growing up for you like? Were you born in a Hispanic community in Los Angeles as well? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, we bounced all over, but yeah, we lived pretty close to, downtown Los Angeles by Echo Park. There was a big Latino Hispanic community back in the day. Now it's gentrified and you can't afford to live there anymore. So
Yeah, story of America.
the story of America. So yeah, my parents, tell us a lot of stories about living in that neighborhood. And Echo Park's a beautiful place now, but back in the day, I guess you used to find bodies in that lake. So that's just LA in the 70s and 80s was one of the most dangerous places in America.
Yeah. Were you free as a kid? Like, did your mom, knowing that the neighborhood you grew up in, like allow you go out, play freely, like trust you enough to know what's wrong or what's right? Or she was kind of like, you were sheltered, that kind of thing?
We were somewhat sheltered, but my parents did let us hang out on our block. And I actually grew up, we spent a lot of years in Compton, actually. So my adolescent years to about middle school, I was living in Compton, California, the infamous Compton.
Nice. Did you ever want to become a rapper at some point? No?
No, so I actually lived in an all-black neighborhood. So we were the only Hispanic family and our neighbors. So it was 2 Hispanic families on the entire block. So we grew up there right when I think like Snoop Dogg and Tupac were at their height. So you could just hear that blasting in every house. And my aunts, who were teenagers at the time that we were living with, they definitely introduced me to all the Compton's finest MCs. So they definitely turned me out. And I've just been listening to hip hop ever since, from growing up in LA. So I think I still listen to a lot of LA rap for the most part. But we were there during the Rodney King riots. So we definitely saw the ugly side of it as well.
Later, like 91, 92, something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were there up to 97. So we left. My parents got over just living in just gang-infested areas, We bounced around from Watts, Southgate, Compton. And that's where a lot of my family resides still. And I think my parents did it.
So some of your other family that came over from like Guatemala or Mexico?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, we just kind of kept expanding one by one. They all came for the most part. And, my mom and on my mom's side and my dad's side, we had a lot. They had a lot of siblings. I think my grandma had 10 kids each.
Would you say that's a very common thing? Because that's one thing I see with Latinos in America. I don't know about other countries. Like one person comes and there's such a sense of community and they want other family members to succeed. Like they try to bring over cousins, and even when they bring over cousins, you stay with your family member for like 3-4 years before you find your feet. But other cultures, it might just be one person that's like, see ya, that kind of thing. With that sense of community, only being 2 Hispanics in a Black neighborhood, did you end up celebrating a lot of like the Hispanic festivities, like Cinco de Mayo, all those things? Like, was it a big enough crowd to hold your own, like in a Black neighborhood? Did you do things in your house from the Hispanic culture?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we were 100%, Latin family on that neighborhood. And like you were saying, though, I think that's what's special about like the Latino community. You said family, and yeah, like a lot of them, coerced their family members to come over, but like they all lived in the same roof. Like my mom was telling me, I mean, at one point there must have been like 8 people in like an apartment building at one point, So that was like the way everyone kind of springboarded into, their own thing. So, and yeah, that lasted years. And even when we did live in Compton, I mean, at the time, it didn't seem out of weird or anything because I was a kid. But if I count how many people lived in that house, there actually was a lot of people that lived in that house,
Got it.
Yeah, it was like us 3 and a cousin and maybe 2 aunts and my grandparents and my mom,
And it must have been fun as well as a kid.
It was a blast.
A lot of people, like different personalities, teaching you things, all that stuff.
Yeah, it was a blast. And my family's big, and we're all over the country now, but, dominantly in LA. So every weekend there was, there's a birthday party or just a barbecue or just football Sunday or something, So every weekend was an event. So my family's really tight like that. At least it was back in the day where we would hang out all the time, And so it was a blast being a kid in that environment.
Nice. Did you find yourself kind of like living a double life sometimes? Well, not double life, because I don't mean this in a negative sense, but in a sense where you're at home, it's like a completely Hispanic culture. You're being spoken, people speak to you in Spanish, you're like the food, like the language, and then you go to school or outside, and it's like American culture, like, and sometimes it's difficult for immigrant children to like draw that line. They don't really understand. Like, was that the case for you as well?
Yeah, for sure. I was a ESL student, English as a second language. So,
really?
Yeah.
Even though you were born here?
Oh, yeah. No,
that's interesting.
Well, like you said, we spoke 100% Spanish at home. And I was a kid, so all we hung out with was Spanish-speaking people.
You know, whoever is listening to this podcast would never have guessed this, because you don't, like, you speak such good, like, English or whatnot. And it's not, like, for you to be an ESL student when you were a kid just goes to show the effect of, like, your family and the Spanish culture growing up.
Yeah, for sure, man. And even living in LA, I mean, parts of LA is might as well be Mexico. You know, it never stopped. It never stopped being Mexico. So when they tell you to go back to your country, you're like, yo, man, I'm here. Like, we never left.
Like there were parts of the U.S. that were actually, because I think Texas was like Tejas.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Los Angeles was actually part of Mexico, but part of the actual landmass of the U.S. was like Mexico.
Yeah, I think, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, a little bit of Colorado.
New Mexico.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so the entire South and, Southwest was Mexico back in the day, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely parts in LA where it's 100% Spanish speakers.
Yeah, tell me about it. So you guys lived there till like 97, and then you moved. Where you moved to?
To Colorado.
Oh, you moved to Colorado?
Yeah, we moved here.
What was the difference? Like, I can imagine Colorado, because Colorado right now seems, to someone like me, it seems like pretty chill. So I can only imagine 97. There are probably like one or two cars on the road or something.
Oh, yeah, seriously. Well, I say this jokingly all the time, but it's partially true. Like, the first time I saw white people was when I came to Colorado.
Really?
Yeah. And that's because I used to hang out in neighborhoods that were like 100% Hispanic or Black, So, and then with the exception of your teachers, like there was teachers that were white, but even some of my teachers in Compton were Black. So yeah, I think I can remember like maybe my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Hammond, or he was white. But so I say that jokingly, but when you come here, it's a large percentage.
Yeah, it's white country, right?
Yeah, white people here. So, and so that was definitely culture shock for our family initially, especially for us who the first high school I went to was Cherry Creek High School, which is,
and Cherry Creek, for people who are listening, it's kind of like the neighborhood, kind of like one of the neighborhoods in Colorado. So it's like up there.
Exactly. So, I mean, there must have been like 5 Black people in Cherry Creek and a couple Hispanic Latino kids, and that was it. There wasn't that many, so that was a weird place to be after coming from California or Los Angeles. Yeah,
okay,
where it's more of a melting pot, pretty diverse.
Yeah. I mean, so you ended up like moving to Colorado with your family. Your family settled here. You went to high school. And then, if I get the timeline correctly, like you joined the military after your senior year?
Yeah, like a year after. I joined the U.S. Army in 2004.
What made you want to go into the Army, especially like, I can't remember, 2004, that was 3 years after 9/11, but that was in the height of when the troops were still being sent over to Afghanistan. And I remember you had all these movies coming out like Fahrenheit 9/11. I was in Nigeria at the time, but Bush was in power. So what made you want to join when you knew there was an active conflict with another country?
I never had any idea that I would have joined the military. I don't have any family members or any history in our family of military service, being, we're first and second generation American. So I was convinced by my friend, actually, and I didn't know what to do after high school. I didn't have any plans. I just signed up to I got accepted to Metropolitan State University of Denver here. And so I did 1 semester there, and I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't for me. And I think my friend felt the same thing. So he's like, hey, I'm going to go speak to a recruiter. And he's like, come with me. I was like, yeah, I'll just roll. It doesn't hurt to go hear what they got to say. And yes, as soon as the recruiter, gave his presentation, I was in, I definitely was sold a dream, and I bought it and signed up. But the crazy part is that my friend who convinced me to go, he decided not to go. Not to go. Last second, he pulled out. But
Do
by
you still
then,
give him shit now? Like I guess he ended up being a little bit, somewhat of a fulfilling experience because we've talked about a whole bunch of your army stories and like seems like you had, some bad times, but some good times as well. That kind of thing.
yeah, definitely. No, he ended up joining the Navy like maybe 2 years later, but it did cause a little rift between us because, he's the one who convinced me to go. But no, I decided to go, and I thought it'd be a good, a way to, I guess, a stepping stone to wherever I would go next. I think initially I knew that I probably wasn't going to make it a career, but they offered free university like, with the GI Bill, and I did want to pursue education because my parents wanted me to do that. So they definitely didn't want me to join the military, and I basically did it without their permission, and then I ended up, like I just told you before we started this recording, I got married and I didn't tell them either, I thought,
wow.
yeah.
That must have broken your mother's heart.
Oh, dude, she was shattered, bro.
Is your mother Catholic?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she was shattered, man.
Are you the first son?
I am the first son.
Elvis.
Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking, man. I think it was just, I don't know, I felt like maybe I was an adult now, and you saw in all the military movies, you get married before you go.
How old were you when you go?
I left, I signed up while I was 18, but I didn't leave until I turned 19.
Okay.
So yeah, you have to wait like 6 months or more.
So young. It's amazing how you can join the military, but you can't drink.
Can't drink, no.
And we talked about that like in one of our private conversations, like you go to a bar in your uniform, but you still have to show ID to show that you're old enough to drink.
Exactly.
That's crazy. Like if I was a bartender, I'll just be like, thanks for your service, man. Like, here you go.
Take whatever you want. Yeah. Luckily for me, I was stationed in Germany where the drinking limit was 18. So all the 18-year-olds there were able to drink as Americans. So I thought that was kind of interesting that we had to abide by local laws. And
local laws really favored you.
Yeah, they really favored us on that one.
If it didn't favor you, like, we Americans.
They may have ruined us too, man, because, drinking became a problem for a lot of people at such an early age there. And
I can see.
There's a big drinking culture in the Army, too.
Like the Army, I feel like a lot of things should be under control because it almost seems like an organization, at least looking from the outside, that no matter what you're going through, if it's like, drinking or drugs or whatever, like the Army has that machine to shape you up kind of thing.
Yeah, there's that side, definitely. They rule with the iron fist. I mean, you can't get, piss hot in your urinalysis tests or else you will be fined and punished, severely in some occasions. But with the drinking, I don't know. They let that one slide as long as it's not
boosts morale.
As long as you're not causing harm to others, then you're good. And all you need to be is, as long as you are where you're supposed to be at on time, then it doesn't matter how much you drank the night before. So there would be people drinking all night long till like 5 or 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And then they would show up to the early morning physical training at 7:30 in the morning.
Physical hungover?
And people would be puking on the side of the road and super hungover. And obviously the sergeants conducting physical training that morning, they would recognize that and they would work you out even harder for being a moron the night before. But that was the extent of that. So, but it was like, I guess, being in a fraternity or something where the drinking culture, can get out of hand.
Got it.
Well, we can get into that. Yeah. Some other time. Yeah. I got a lot of wild stories about those days.
Let's talk about like your marriage. Like, why did you choose like such a young age to get married? Like, was she like your high school sweetheart, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, she was my high school sweetheart.
More so, like, how did this even happen? Like, how did you talk to her that you wanted to get married? Did you actually propose, or you guys just like went away somewhere, that kind of thing?
Yeah, man, I proposed. That shit was, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. Man, I bought a ring on like a 3 or 4 payment plan and things. I went full on, man. But I don't know what made me want to get married. She definitely was my high school sweetheart. I don't know if it was because I wanted to, stay connected with something or someone while I, went away to basic training. And, Yeah. So, and then obviously you see in the movies, like, that was like a thing to do. You get married and then you go to war.
Just before,
yeah. Yeah. And I think it is just to have that connection to, your country or your state, your city, your loved ones. So yeah, maybe that's the reason I did it. And obviously I was in love with this girl at the time. But, looking back at it, I think, maybe we did have some issues towards the end. And I think maybe the marriage thing was to, put a Band-Aid. It was a Band-Aid to maybe a bigger problem. And we probably should have broken up. But I think we both saw, it's like, oh, we're adults now. We can get married. And, I'm about to go to the Army. And the military provides a pretty good life for married, a married couple. You get housing and she gets health care as well. And then if you have kids, there's, they pay for some of the schooling and daycare, all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, having a family in the military, you get a lot of benefits for that, So, but it didn't work out. It didn't work out at all, man.
How long did you guys stay married?
6 months, man. 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you pretty much, and your first tour in Germany was how long?
Well, the whole tour was 4 years. And
so you stayed in Germany for 4 years?
Yeah, I was in Germany for 3.5, and then I spent the rest of the time in Iraq. But yeah, so I don't know, should we get into that story?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sure. Might as well. as much as you feel comfortable divulging.
That's another crazy story that we talked about. We're definitely like deviating from Hispanic Heritage Month, but we can talk about this really quickly. But so we got married, and I get stationed in Germany. And again, the military is going to do what they can to, bring her over to me so that I was getting housing set up. And I was in communication with my wife at the time. And next thing you know, I started calling her like a week before she was supposed to travel, and just to make sure everything was okay. And I was in the middle of training. It looked like I was about to get deployed to Iraq. So I was going to be unable to help her because I was going to go to the Middle East. So I was trying to get everything sorted before I left. And then she stopped answering the phone. I couldn't get a hold of her. I was calling her multiple times a day. And, this is at the time when, you had to buy a calling card,
So like 2005?
Yeah, 2004. 2004, there wasn't smartphones in our pocket at that time. So, burning through calling cards, trying to get a hold of her. And yeah, she was MIA. I start calling her family, and they don't know where she is either. So they've been calling her, and they're like,
all her family lived in the same state as well?
Yeah, here in Colorado. And they were calling, then they started calling me trying to find her. And I'm like, well, I have no idea. I haven't heard from her in days. And days turned into months.
Wow.
Days turned into months.
Did that put some stress on you being in a foreign country and not knowing what's going on?
Oh, of course, man. I was, again, going through culture shock yet again, because now I'm in Europe, and don't know the language. I don't necessarily need to know the language, but as soon as you leave the gates of the army posts, then you're just in Germany, and so I was adjusting to this new life. And and then my wife was missing. And turned out I didn't have to go to Iraq, so I had more time to, that time I ended up going later down the road, but I had more time to dedicate to try to find her. And then I realized I didn't realize, her brother, and then one day her brother called me and said that I found her. I found her.
This was after 3 months?
This was months. Yeah, this was like 4 months or something that I haven't heard from her. And her brother calls me saying that he found her, and they were somewhere like in a motel room. He found her and her best friend in a motel room with like a traveling group of people. But the weird part about it is that all the women in the group are pregnant. And and so I'm getting this news like, yo, she's pregnant. So not only that she disappeared for months, I found her and she's pregnant. Like, I was like, what? And so obviously rocked my world. I mean, definitely hit a bout of depression at that moment in time, and questioning everything. Like, what did I do? What happened?
Wait, her and a group of women in the motel room pregnant? Like, what was that situation?
I was so far removed at that time from, Colorado, and I was in Europe that I couldn't get all the details. You know, I couldn't get all the details because I was in the middle of like some intense training, preparing to go to war. And so I didn't really have time the military didn't allow me that time to worry even, you know? But obviously in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life, you know? I can't, so it just, the plot thickened, you know? You know, I thought she might have been dead at the time, you know, when no one could find her, not even her family. But then, yeah, it turns out she was in some type of cult. But
she was in a cult?
Her brother called it a cult. And I can't confirm what cult this was or not, but her family referred to it as, you know, our daughter has joined a cult.
If her and a group of people, a group of girls were pregnant together in a motel room, maybe there was some brainwashing going on somehow. I don't know. And I could imagine like if they were all like the same age or pretty young, less than 20 or something.
Yeah. Early 20s is what they said. Definitely they were all young from what I heard. But I never saw her again. You know, I never saw her again.
Wait, did her family get the police involved to like rescue her from the whole thing? Like what was that whole situation like?
Yeah, I mean, her parents owned a security company, so I think they were definitely having the authorities involved at the time. And again, I wasn't a part of any of this, you know, which was, crazy to even think back on right now. But yeah, I never saw her again. So we got married in 2004.
She never spoke, never wrote a letter, never reached back out to you 5 years later or anything like.
She did reach out. So she reached out maybe like 4 years later, 5 years later.
Wow.
And there were, well, I don't want to get into all the details, but
yeah, you don't have to.
No, there was a moment where I did track her down, and I realized where she was, and I was home on vacation. And I found out where she worked, and I tried to go see her, and she didn't want to see me. And I guess she hid in the back of her shop, and her manager called her, and they told her who was at the door waiting, and she never came out. And next thing you know, the police came, and I'm like, what? They got me out of there, man. It was the weirdest situation ever. So at that moment, I'm like, all right, well, whatever, you know, it's definitely over. But I was able to get it annulled off my record because it was a special case, and my marriage was listed as abandoned. So she abandoned me. So maybe that's why I have abandonment issues now, you know, it's because of that. No, I'm just joking. But I got it annulled from my record, and I never saw her again. You know, she wrote me a few times while I was deployed to Iraq. I ended up getting deployed in 2006, and I did receive some emails from her apologizing and wanting to, reunite, and she wanted to apologize in person. But at that time, or at that point in my life, I had completely moved on, and I actually even forgave her, you know, because my life in Europe and the Army, at least the initial part of my tour of duty was great. You know, I think it was some of the best times I've ever had in my life. You know, I definitely miss those days. And I can't imagine what my life would have been if, you know, she would have came over and I would have just been married. I wouldn't have actually maybe had special bonds with some of the people that I served with, or I wouldn't have had the same experiences. So I 100% had moved on, and I was happy the way my life turned out without her being in the picture. I couldn't see it back then. I was definitely devastated and crushed and depressed for months.
I mean, you were young. So
I was young, yeah.
Damn.
And this was my first relationship. So like it was, I didn't have any other relationships in high school, you know. I was a shy kid, you know, under the radar. And that was my first relationship ever. And so it was definitely completely heartbreaking, you know. But I think I ended up meeting some really great people in the Army, and, you know, they got me out of the rut. I went full on as a soldier. My career as a soldier took off.
That's the thing in the Army, right? Like the brotherhood in the Army. Like how, and, you know, I asked this to Elizabeth, who is in the Army as well. In the Army, is there opportunity? How much cultural identity are you allowed to portray in the army? Like, for instance, like if you're in the U.S. Army, is it just okay? We know you're from Mexico, we know you're from Cuba, we know you're from not Cuba, but we know you're from XYZ, other places, but that's it? Or do they allow people to actually form like subgroup bonds? Like, do they also celebrate like the different cultural events that their soldiers, the countries they're from, that kind of thing? Or it's pretty much, hey, you know what, like everyone pledges allegiance to the flag and all culture is American culture right now, that kind of thing.
Um, I was just thinking, the only part of that of our culture that they celebrated was Taco Tuesday. That was just, that was it. No,
All the good stuff.
yeah, exactly. No, unfortunately, I think a lot of that, gets. I won't say beat out of you, but I mean, you definitely have to fall under the flag. And I think that's the purpose of everyone wearing the same uniform, So they definitely say, we're not, blue, green, white, black in here. We're all green or army green.
No, but don't the individual cultures, like I understand that perfectly, like especially for an organization like the Army, you're fighting for the American flag. But like there are cases where your culture serves as an advantage. Like you guys are in a country where they need your Spanish skills, or you're in a place where you, because of your cultural knowledge, you understand that situation better, that kind of thing. Like, do you think the Army would be a better place if they recognize some of that stuff, or you think that the cultures are just so many that it might just be all over the place, so that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. I mean, obviously, when I was in the Middle East, if you spoke Arabic, then yeah, of course you were used. But I mean, you were used to, be a translator, and your purpose there was to help with aiding, the killing of insurgents, So that's how your, I guess your background and knowledge is used, is to gather intelligence and, I guess cross some of these people off the list.
How cross off? That must be a military term.
Yeah. But even too, man, like even with me, I was León like the entire time, my whole life. But when you get to the Army, you're Leon. And if you try to correct them, they're like, León, fuck that, you're Leon, So I don't know if it's a way just to kind of simplify things. Obviously, the other like Latino and Hispanic soldiers, like we would all call each other by, appropriately. But yeah, I mean, everyone else, I mean, that's one thing you lose, is you start losing a little bit of your identity, I guess.
Except on Taco Tuesdays.
Except on Taco Tuesdays, yeah. They always had like different, like the cafeteria, it'd be like Italian Wednesdays, Mexican Tuesdays. So that was as far as
it went.
It went, yeah.
Okay. At least that was like, you were this young kid who went to like all these countries like Germany, Afghanistan. Obviously, you weren't on vacation in those countries. How was it like for like, I've interviewed a bunch of military people on the podcast before, but you specifically, like particularly in 2004, 2007, that must have been like a tumultuous time for like American troops in places like Afghanistan. Like you did like part of your 4-year tour, 6 months was in Afghanistan. How was that like for you?
It was actually 15 months. 15 months in Iraq. I never went to Afghanistan, and 15 months is one of the longest deployments you can have in the military. So at that moment in time, a lot of regiments and battalions were being stop-lossed, and that meant that your contract...
That's a real thing, right?
Yeah, your contract was involuntarily extended. So my contract was 3 years, and I ended up doing 4 years. And that was because it was the height of the war. It was the height of the war, and recruitment was low, and they were taking anyone and everyone. There was a lot of people that probably shouldn't have been in the military, for sure.
Yeah, I even know, like, for immigrants, they had like a MAVNI program where I think they've discontinued that program, but I think that was like the height of it, like the mid-2000s.
Yeah, there was, international people from all over the world, man. But I met people there from, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans there, straight from Puerto Rico. A lot of them didn't even speak English.
Wow.
They were going to English school.
English school.
Yeah.
While they were in the army.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was people with prior records that were allowed in.
That's funny.
So you needed a waiver to join the military at that time, and there was always there was weird rules. Like if you had visible tattoos, you couldn't join the military, but that went out the window too. Like you can get a waiver for that. So there was a lot of people. The military bend the rules when recruitment was low and we were at the height of the war. So everybody was allowed.
It's pretty interesting because like where I come from, like, and people might attribute like different reasons for it. Like getting into the military is super hard. Like there's never a shortage of people. Now, some people might say because in a country like Nigeria, there's not a lot of economic opportunities. So one of the few ways you can actually not only earn a livable wage, but also have some prestige in the society is by joining the military. So maybe that's what's driving up the recruitment numbers. But I see that in America, for like the greatest country in the world, why don't a lot of its citizens want to defend it? Like, why is the military, like the military is now doing like esports and all this recruitment tactics just to bring in teenagers. Why are people not voluntarily going out there to fight for the country they say they love, you know?
Yeah, man. Well, this place is complicated, man, you know, and we have a lot of individual freedoms and rights. And I think we have the right not to join the military, you know, and we have, I think only 1% of the population has joined or is currently serving in the military.
Why I say that, like, I take it back to, you know, like the 1600s, like in the days of like horses and, you know, where people fight with swords and all that Braveheart kind of shit. Like people like, you know, you go back in Rome, it was like a privilege for you to lead a Roman battalion to go to, or Greece, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, I don't really see that. But again, like you said, you know, it's a very complicated response. And, you know, it's, I don't know, maybe one way to prop up recruiting is to tell the Latino mothers and other immigrant mothers that, hey, we have some culture in here. Maybe that's how they can get, get people in there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm sure the military's changed a lot. I mean, I got out in 2008, you know, late 2008. So it's been, you know, over almost 15 years, you know. So, yeah, I'm sure it's changed a lot. And I'm just kind of painting a picture of that time frame, 2004 to 2008. And yeah, a lot, the standards have changed. They're always changing, you know, but at the same time, I think back to how recruitment was low. I mean, there was a lot of controversy to that war, you know, there's a lot, and still is, you know, then Syria happened soon after. And, but yeah, I mean, we definitely, the U.S. destabilized that entire region, you know, and when all the facts started coming out, then I think that turns people off, you know, from going. And I mean, I know it turned me off when I was there, you know, definitely being in the middle of, you know, the desert in Iraq and realizing like there's nothing here, you know, like what is the importance of this like property or land that we're on? And you can't really ask too many questions, you know, and but you know, as the months and months passed, it's hard to comprehend being in war, you know, and seeing all the, you know, death and destruction and deaths. And, you know, I lost friends there. I even had a pet dog and she was killed too, you know, like it was just life, man. Life is incredibly fragile in a place like that. And you realize at the end, like, what the hell is it all for, you know? And
gives you some perspective.
Oh, 100%. And obviously we know that, I mean, there's still some troops there, but we've been there 20 years now, you know, and mission was not accomplished.
Depends on who you ask.
Depends on who you ask. Depends on who you ask. Yeah, a lot of people made a lot of money during that time period. Halliburton and all these other big companies, security companies like Blackwater, no longer called that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of controversy surrounding that time period, and you know, and still then the next war, whatever that it's going to be.
Yeah, like, I don't think wars are going to be physical anymore. The way they're fighting wars nowadays will probably be more like cyber propaganda, election interference, and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That is modern warfare.
But anyway, you picked up the hobby, right? Like when you were in the military, like, you picked up a camera for some reason and started like...
Yeah, I think
your documentary skills kind of thing.
Yeah, I think during that period, that's when all the new, I guess, toys were coming out, like the iPod. The iPod came out, and and we were all young and had a lot of money to spend. You don't spend any money really when you're in the military. It's all spending money, because your housing is paid for, your meals are paid for. So, and we were, I think, the first generation to, have the first wave of smartphones, and the iPod and the handheld camera, the digital cameras started coming out. And so I think we were the first generation of soldiers that were actually documenting the war ourselves, because in Vietnam, it was like the most documented war of all time because the media and journalists were allowed there. But the soldiers didn't have that those electronics and equipment. So my era, we were the first with handheld cameras and GoPros. So that's when you started seeing all the images and of war from firsthand accounts. So I just started recording. I mean, I didn't have any interest in experience. I didn't ever owned a camera before. That wasn't like a Polaroid or disposable. Yeah, disposable cameras were pretty popular back then.
Yeah, like the Kodak?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just you buy with 20, a roll of 20 photos and you go to get it developed. But so yeah, it was the first digital camera that I ever had. And I just started taking photos, obviously just documenting of, my time in Germany, Europe, I was at the World Cup that year in 2006.
Germany 2006.
Yeah.
I remember the opening match, Lam.
Yeah.
I think Lam scored a goal.
Yeah, man. Being in Germany for that was absolutely incredible.
Awesome.
But yeah, so and then when we went to war, I had that camera. It was a part of like my utility belt. It was part of it. So it was handy.
Ammo, camera.
Yeah, 120 rounds of ammunition, M4, water bottles, and my camera. It went with me on every single mission. So yeah, I would just do like vlogs, I guess, and video diaries at the time. And I picked up editing software, very like new editing software at the time, and learned how to use that. So yeah, that was my I guess first step into becoming a filmmaker. I didn't think that I would ever be in that industry. And when I left the military, I drove past the film school and I didn't even know they existed. So I went in and started that journey.
Got into film school. Wait, just out of curiosity, though, the semester you spent at Met State before you enlisted into the military, what were you studying there?
I was going to be a teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was going to be a teacher.
Interesting. I mean, I guess you can still do that now, like teach film or something at one point.
Yeah, I guess I do that sometimes. I teach filmmaking workshops from time to time. I work for this organization called Story Center, and we teach 3-day workshops to first-time filmmakers. And we work with different groups in the community. So we've done workshops with survivors of AIDS and trauma or military veterans. So I've actually led a couple workshops where you teach people how to tell a personal story. And so it's very therapeutic. And for some reason, no one tells happy stories. I think they use this workshop as like therapy, and people write about some, life-changing moments,
Yeah, the military really seems like an organization where you're trained to listen, not necessarily to speak, like if I can, respectfully make that assumption.
No, yeah, definitely, man. I mean, that's why there's so many people out here dealing with post-traumatic stress, is because you're not taught how to deal with those emotions. When you're in the Army, they train you to be a beast. They train you to be a pit bull, and all your chants and cadences you are singing while you're working out or you're training in the field are all about killing or death. And just getting your mind right. So when you're there, you won't hesitate, and when you're there, it's outrageous, it's ludicrous how the conditions that you live in and just I guess all the death that you see, but you lean on your brothers, because it's like being in a dream and sometimes a nightmare, and I still can't believe that I was there,
For a long time.
And it changes you forever, especially, being there 15 months, and there was good times there too, again, with your buddies, the camaraderie was high because it had to be, that's all you really had. But yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, feelings and anger and sadness that you just pushed down because you had to go to work the next day. I mean, we had people that would die and we had a mission the next morning. No time to grieve or mourn. Yeah, so, and I think that's the problem. Like, and I understand. I mean, you're in a war zone. You really have a task at hand. There is a mission. So, but unfortunately, I think you spend the rest of your life
At the detriment of,
processing that period of time. And I just went for 15 months, and 10 years later, it's something that I think about all the time. I think I have more of a control on it than it has a control on me. But I have friends who, I mean, in a 10-year enlistment, I mean, they went to war 5-6 years of that 10 years, So imagine that, like, so half of your enlistment, yes, there was people that were there 20 years, retired, they were in a war 10 years, easy,
wow.
At least 10 to 15,
Wow.
If you ever do a podcast about like some of these seasoned war vets, I got a couple people that you need to talk to because they spent like 9 years in Iraq.
God, that seems like a 4-hour podcast,
right?
Like a very long podcast.
Yeah, man. So
like I'm not American, but I really have to just living in America. I can see how the extent of the military provides for certain freedoms. Is it always done ethically? Is it always done for the right reasons? Not really. At the end of the day, capitalism drives a lot of things, but I can see how some of those efforts provide for some of the freedom that just both citizens and non-citizens, like inhabitants, are enjoying in the country. So let me just be the first to say, I appreciate whatever service, your service in the military when you were in the military. But let's peel back the layers and get back to this cultural talk. Have you ever been to Guatemala or Mexico? Which did you go to first? And how was your trip there?
I've been to both, and I went to Mexico first. I think just because
that's closer.
Yeah, it's closer. And yeah, my mom grew up in Mexico City, and then they moved closer to the border in Sonora, Mexico. Yuma, Arizona is on the other side. Oh. Yeah. So I have family now today in both Yuma and Sonora. And so, yeah, we used to go there, maybe once a year as kids.
So from when you were a kid, so it wasn't foreign to you. It wasn't like, I'm sure, was it a culture shock at all?
Not really. I mean, it for sure is the desert. Like you're driving on, sandy roads, visiting your family, and it's fucking hot as hell down there, So, yeah, I don't think so. I don't remember it being a culture shock thing. We always went there for, again, like special events,
I mean, growing up in LA and everything, you're probably, around enough Mexican people for it not to be that much of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it was family. So, yeah, it was all good. So I have a lot of fond memories of some of those early trips going. And, yeah, it was always revolved around some kind of family event gathering. So it was always a good time. And getting to Guatemala took a couple more years to go down there. But yeah, maybe in my life I've been maybe like 5 or 6 times. And usually every time I go is for about a month. So yeah, I don't have that, or at least back then I didn't have a special connection to Guatemala and also didn't really interact too much with my Guatemalan side of the family.
So your parents never how much important was it for, like, I'm speaking about this from like the African perspective, from like the Nigerian perspective. Nigerian parents want their kids, they don't want their kids to be too Americanized, like just like your name, Leon and Leone. Like, if you say that to a Nigerian parent, you're going back home for 2 years. Do you not to say your name right? It's important for them to have their kids be in touch with the culture. Did you see more of that, like from your mom's side, taking to Mexico a lot of times, or not really? Is that a thing in the Hispanic culture?
In my family, I got to be honest, no. I mean, I think my parents, first of all, they were working all the time, So my dad, to this day, works 7 days a week, Every single day he doesn't stop, I really rarely saw him. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't spend too much time with my Guatemalan side of the family, is because my dad was always gone, working. So he didn't really take us over there too much. And so I think every time someone asks me, oh, where are you from? I always say Mexican. That's like my default answer, because I was raised more by my Mexican side. But yeah, and same with my mom. She worked a lot, so we spent a lot of time in front of the TV. The TV was our babysitter.
Babysitter, got it.
And so I think that's probably why we learned how to speak English. The TV helped a lot, for sure. And obviously, I think that's how we integrated probably more into becoming Americans, is by watching all these TV shows that we used to grow up with. So, but no, they never really said, like, I think because we already spoke Spanish, I think that was their only criteria. Like, you got to speak Spanish, you know? But anything else after that, like, you know, I guess you guys are American, really, you know? You guys are from here. And yeah, I think my dad calls me gringo sometimes to this day, you know?
Gringo, that's a white person. Like, that's American.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I actually just learned this because I spent a month in Guatemala last year. And a gringo is anybody who's just from the U.S. or just just American,
non-Hispanic.
Yeah, exactly. American, basically. Yeah, just an American. But yeah, so my dad calls me gringo sometimes because
that's funny. That might be the title of this episode.
Yeah, my dad calls me gringo.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, sure, it could be, man. That'd be funny. But yeah, man. So. Yeah, it's always weird, I guess, thinking about, you know, like even my identity, riding this wave is, when people ask you where you're from, I think my story is pretty complicated. I think that's the same. It goes the same for most Hispanic and Latino individuals, because we are a melting pot, you know, and a lot of us, you know, really don't know where we, you know, came from. We don't have like that family history that goes back, you know, generations and generations, you know. Like I ask my dad, like, hey, like, you know, what did you know, grandpa do? Or do you think are we indigenous? Are we Spaniard? Like, where do you think we come from? And my dad doesn't know anything past his grandfather. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of our history gets lost.
But at least you know where you're from. Like when I say where you're from, like the land where you came from, you can trace it back compared to like, you know, some other groups that have just been stuck in America for generations that can't even like know what country to go back to. You know, that kind of thing. But, you know.
But yeah, no, I was just thinking too, like, you know, a lot of us, or, you know, I want to speak, you know, just from personal experience. I think that a lot of people in the Hispanic community are like, you know, socially unaware, you know, and that's like kind of that's, you know, the tragic truth, I think.
You know what? It's interesting you say that. I'm sorry to cut you short, because this thing I'm doing is like, you know, like Hispanic Heritage Month or whatnot. All the Latino and Hispanic people I've been reaching out to, like half of them, when I say, look, I'm doing this thing for my podcast, can you like recommend anyone? But they're like, what is? I'm not Hispanic and I like kind of know, you know, that kind of thing. But
facts, man. I mean, I think if you ask like, you know, 7 out of 10 Latino Hispanic people what month Hispanic Heritage Month is, I don't think most people know.
But the sense of community is so strong. So is it safe to say that, and at the risk of making like a huge generalization, is it safe to say like the sense of community is so important, but not as important as the sense of history? Is that a thing? Or
I don't know. It's hard, man. I mean, I think like the Latinos, Hispanics in this country, you know, I think we're invisible in many ways, you know. We're definitely not represented. Like our history is not taught in schools, you know, and a lot of Hispanic Latinos who come to this country, like my parents, they come here to work, you know, and you can't really see them in our society because they're, you know, in the fields and on rooftops and construction, you know, yards or under a vehicle. Like my dad. My dad's a mechanic, you know. So I think that we definitely fly under the radar, and we're just hard workers, man. My family's hard workers, and that's all they really think about. They came here to work, and like that's what they do, and they all have a connection back home, like, or a exit strategy, like my parents. Like they always knew that they would come here and work 20 years and just go back home, and they're
really,
and they're in the process of doing that right now, you know.
Really? That's interesting. Is that common, or that's just like your family specifically?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'm just speaking from my personal experience, but I think a lot of Latinos, especially in the ones that I know in my family, they always had a 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Yeah. So, and I think maybe that's why, like my dad, I mean, he doesn't speak English, you know, like he can speak English, and you know, he's in a vehicle
He doesn't
exporter.
like to speak English.
He doesn't like to speak English.
And he's been here since Elvis, since the 70s.
Since the 70s.
Got it.
Since the 70s. And I don't know if he's embarrassed or not feel comfortable. And
I don't think it's embarrassment. I think there's a system for you to function as a Spanish speaker comfortably. Like any store I go to, if there's a sign for an exit or whatnot, there's like English and Spanish. Yeah. So it's like you can function comfortably. You don't have to learn English. Me, what if I come from,
You don't. And, in the community where my dad works, it's 100% Spanish speaking, So he never really had to learn, He caters to Spanish speaking only customers. So in America, but that's, I guess, the beauty of this place that, you can come here from any, where in the world, and you will find pockets of people who, speak like you and,
It's supposed to be the United States.
It's the United States. Yeah.
Kind of thing.
But, yeah, where were we going with this? I don't remember.
No, just just talking shit. The purpose of the podcast is really casual, and I know we got derailed.
Yeah, we got derailed a lot.
There, but just kind of like wrapping up. You are going to Guatemala in a couple of days. From now, you'll probably be there for a couple of months. We're working on a project together, and hopefully, like our podcast listeners, we can expatiate on that as we go deeper into the project, maybe sometime towards the end of the year. But just what are you expecting, without going into like too more detail, just from like the cultural side? Like, what do you hope to do? What new experiences do you hope to like be part of in Guatemala? And, since this is more or less going to be like a family trip, like a bunch of your family are going, like what do you guys have in store? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Let's see. Where do we begin? So I went to Guatemala last year for the first time in a decade, and I had like a really bad 2019. Like it was maybe the worst year of my life, So I went into like a deep depression, and I had a lot of mental health issues that I was dealing with. So I actually went to Guatemala like because I thought that was a place that I needed to be to recover, because I felt like I was estranged from that side of my, I guess, my upbringing, and I wanted to reconnect with my roots. But at the same time, and maybe this is like a sneak peek of what our podcast is about, a pretty serious crime happened to my family in Guatemala. So my family vowed never to return because of this. And at the time, during my mental health, bout, I didn't feel anything, actually. I didn't feel anything besides maybe fear. And I thought about going to the place that I feared the most to kind of feel alive again. And this was Guatemala, the place that my dad's from, and the place that I'm estranged from. But yeah, I haven't returned since 2009 because I had a gun pulled on me. And then a few years later is when that crime happened against my family member, and well, it happened to my father. So, and that's what the podcast will be about. And I'm actually working on a documentary about this crime that happened in Central America, but actually there was a connection here in Colorado. So there's a connection to the crime in Colorado. Here in Colorado. And so, yeah, I vowed never to return to Guatemala. And after I went through that mental health bout, I decided to go to the place that, I feared the most to feel alive again. And I was on the doorstep of where this serious crime happened to my father. And I went there to, recover and heal from what I had just experienced. But at the same time, I was seeking closure to this crime that took place. So to Guatemala is I don't know, it's a complex place, and it's, for my family, it's caused a lot of trauma. But I decided to make a documentary about this story. And I'm going there next week for a month to try to finish my documentary. And I think I'm going to go there to capture some of the last pieces and interview eyewitnesses and some of the authorities involved in this case. And yeah, hopefully when I come back and see you, we'll keep piecing this podcast together, because I think that's the goal right now. So without giving too much away, I guess we're working on a true crime podcast.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting story. And, I can't wait to, let our listeners, obviously the listeners of Cultural Class, will have like a sneak peek to it. But, really hope to be as authentic as possible with Elvis' story and, with as much respect to his family as we possibly can, but still maintaining that authenticity to the story. So you guys should just watch out, early 2021, see what happens. And last question. What are your, now your dad and mom had this experience in Mexico, came to the US, you pretty much grew up like American and Guatemalan and Mexican. Your kids now, what do you think their connection to Guatemala and Mexico will be? Because they'll be like third generation like this. Do you see, or I guess it depends, right, on a variety of factors like who you end up getting married to, where you raised them, all that stuff. But how much of the Latino, the Hispanic culture do you think you can pass on to your kids from what you got from your parents, that kind of thing?
Hopefully I can preserve, what was taught to me and build upon that, I definitely, whoever my kids are, my future wife will be, I do plan on taking them to Guatemala and Mexico, and yeah, I think the most important part is to maybe conserve the language. I think a lot of kids who are born in the States don't know or aren't taught Spanish. And I can say that my nephew, he's 9, he doesn't speak Spanish. And so I think it only takes one generation to lose it. So it's an easy one to lose. And I think if you lose that, then that also maybe will prevent him from wanting to go to a place like Mexico and Guatemala. I do know some, second, third generation Latinos here, my friends, who they've never been, and they're scared to go because of what they hear on the news, and that's a shame. That's a shame.
It's the same thing in Nigeria. Also, the same thing. If you're so far removed and you've heard all these stories, you don't want to go because of the perception, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and yeah, and I was almost a victim of that too. When I go back, everyone clearly knows that I'm not from there. I have an accent. I have a weird accent because of
while you're speaking Spanish.
Yeah, while I'm speaking Spanish, people can't place it because I have this mix of Guatemalan and Mexican slang, and so it's a mess. But yeah, hopefully that my future kids will learn Spanish, because I think me taking them there and showing them our culture and, introducing them to some of our heroes, even in cinema, I grew up watching a lot of, Spanish films, and some of the, classic actors that I'd like to, pass that along to, and some of our, heroes who fought for social justice here in this country. And so I think that's maybe what Hispanic Heritage Month is to at least acknowledge all the efforts of our, elders.
Yep, and that's exactly what it is, because a bunch of Hispanic countries got independence on September 15th and through October 15th, a lot of countries. So that's why celebrate the month.
Yeah, but I think we definitely have a lot more work to do, because we just said a lot of people don't know what month Hispanic Heritage Month is, and we are under the radar, and we are underrepresented even in TV. There's no leading Latino actors in any of these big Hollywood movies at the moment, and even me, while working on sets, I'm usually the only colored person on the movie set, and I've worked on some decent size sets Men in Black International and Hobbs and Shaw and other ad commercials and ads. And there's not that many people of color working in the film industry, and that's already been a topic of discussion that's being debated now. So hopefully that changes, but yeah, we'll see.
Elvis, I want to thank you so much, like, for coming on the podcast, for finding time to come speak to me before you leave on your trip. Just for clarity, for listeners who are listening, Hispanic Heritage Month is September 15th to October 15th every year. I'm not sure if it's celebrated globally or if it's just the US, but I know it started, I think, in the US. But yeah, so, in honor of that, we're just trying to have people of Hispanic descent on the podcast throughout the month of October. So, Elvis, can you take it away by speaking some Spanish? You want to say thank you for being on the podcast, like listen to Cultural Class, see you guys later, whatever you want to say. Put you on the spot there.
Well, muchas gracias por escuchar Culture Class y que Dios... No, let me-
Oh, go ahead.
Me llamo Elvis León y fue un placer conocer Nusa y muchas gracias por escuchar este episodio de Culture Class y gracias por todo el apoyo y gracias a Nusa por invitarme.
All right. I had pollo there. What's it about chicken? I'm just kidding.
All right. No, but yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, most definitely. And as always, you guys can follow Culture Class everywhere. It's Culture Class Podcast on social media. Visit our website, cultureclasspodcast.com. Send us an email, cultureclasspodcast@gmail.com, and tell us what you think about the episode. Use the hashtag Hispanic Heritage Month. Reach out to your Latino friends or make new ones and find out a little bit about your culture. Till next time, guys, have a good one.